Hello and welcome to this week's edition of World of Business, your weekly guide to trending business news and latest developments on the stock market. We also get to cast a spotlight on thriving but unsung entrepreneurs on this show. The name is Bruce Chibunde, and let's get straight into it. United States of America President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs on imports from Zimbabwe and the rest of the world came into effect recently. Zimbabwe was slapped with an 18% tariff on all its exports to the United States. However, President Mnangagwa responded by removing all tariffs on U.S. goods entering the country to foster mutual trade relations. It's good to have you back here, Marlon, to discuss this matter. Perhaps to get us started, what are tariffs and what impact do they have on global trade relations and international trade?
Thank you. So basically a tariff is a tax on imports or exports, depending on the country under consideration. So we're just saying for every dollar that you import, you pay a corresponding percentage of the tariff in quantity or in price. So it affects obviously international trade in the sense that it distorts the efficient flow of trade of products due to taxes. Taxes are not a market determined variable, but they are more of a policy determined based on what a particular government wants to achieve and its strategic intent of the particular product in consideration. All right.
So when we talk about these tariffs, you say they're meant to, some of them obviously emanate from a nationalist perspective. While that is, perhaps the position, it does not then also infringe on the other, countries, nationalists, and emanating in perhaps a breakdown in international relations.
Well, obviously it douses and it distorts, international flow of goods and services internationally. So you look at its effects diplomatically, both economic diplomacy and political diplomacy. It distorts it to some extent, but it's a direct, aggression or effrontery to a particular country's competitiveness due to factors beyond the trading under consideration. For example, protectionism. For example, defense considerations, just to mention a few.
All right. How do tariffs differ from other, trade restrictions such as quotas and embargoes?
So a tariff is a direct tax, and it's revenue generating probably for the country that is imposing the tariff. Whereas an embargo and a quota is quantitative, where you've got a limit. On an embargo is an outright, saying we don't want
your goods
your goods here. Then a quota is quantitative in the sense that it gives a particular level of import for a particular product. For example, we can say we've got a quota on certain chairs in this country. We can put a certain quantity of tons that can be imported by a particular company per year or by a particular sector per year, thereby controlling the quantity that is circulating in the country and that is competing with the existing industry in a particular country.
All right. With African countries, inclusive of Zimbabwe, having been slapped by an 18% tariff on all their exports to the United States, what do you think perhaps the implications of this decision?
Well, obviously, it makes our exports less competitive in the sense that for every dollar that we're exporting, it's got an 18% tax, which is probably more pricier as compared to other industries or other sources of that particular product. So it makes our pricing competitiveness, less, and also it puts the foreign currency generating capacity of African countries in jeopardy because of every currency is backed by exports. So any reduction in potential export is a direct effect on foreign currency generating capacity. But over and above that, the immediate impact which it will have is its signaling effect on our economy, particularly in Zimbabwe, where we have got huge metal production and export to international markets that are priced using the US dollar. So you find that there's been a correlation, or rather a relationship, between the imposition of these tariffs and the pricing movements of heavy metals internationally. Platinum group of minerals has been turbulent at the moment because of these tariff impositions because it jeopardizes basically the flow of trade of these metals, and also American companies don't know, they will probably have to realign their sourcing capabilities to other countries that are non-tariff in order to cut their costs and remain afloat and competitive in the face of this new tariff position.
All right. So it certainly does, create a lot of issues around the, global trade arena. Government announced the removal of tariffs on American imports with the stated aim of facilitating the expansion of American imports within the Zimbabwean market, while at the same time promoting exports of local goods to the world's biggest economy. What's your take on that?
So I think it's a two-pronged approach in the sense that if you look at the level of imports and exports in Zimbabwe, it's between 50 and 60 million US dollars. So this is an ambition, probably increase the trade between the two countries, holding other aspects such as the political situation constant. So it's basically economic diplomacy to say, and signaling that while there's been aggression in terms of a tariff on our products, we are non-confrontational. And we intend to increase in trade and relations between the countries in the medium to long term, holding the other reactions that and the other potential trade wars that are currently prevalent internationally.
All right. Do you see this actually being able to achieve this?
Well, in the short term, maybe not much, but in the medium to long term, I'm hoping for a reduction or doing away with the current tariff that's currently standing. It can provide a solid platform for further relations around international trade between the two countries, both exports and imports, and also probably increase demand for our commodities internationally, which will signal foreign currency generating capacity and the downstream effect which it has on our commodity-based economy.
All right. You have had it from Mr. Mnangagwa. We are talking about the recent developments of the new policy that was recently launched by the United States President with regards to tariffs. Board of Business takes a short break and we'll be right back. Back to the second segment of World of Business. As alluded to earlier, United States of America President Mr. Donald Trump put in place reciprocal tariffs on imports from Zimbabwe and the rest of the world. Zimbabwe was slapped with an 18% tariff on all its exports to the United States. However, President Mnangagwa responded by removing all tariffs on U.S. goods entering the country to foster mutual trade relations. We get to continue this discussion with economist Mr. Mnangagwa. Mr. Malon, trade data reveals that Zimbabwe's exports to the U.S. are valued at US $60 million annually, and while U.S. exports to Zimbabwe are valued at US $50 million, raising questions about the effectiveness of this policy shift in impacting Zimbabwe's economic landscape. What's your take on that?
So I believe there's a direct effect and an indirect effect of this particular policy. Direct in the sense that obviously from the quantitative perspective, we need to increase trade relations between the two countries. Because we are speaking of trillions of dollars circulating in the US economy and billions of dollars circulating in Zimbabwe, but we've got millions of dollars in trade. So there's need for that to be capacitated to increase the cake in terms of trade between the two countries. And then the indirect obviously will be on the signaling effect. As I mentioned earlier, America is a heavy consumer of heavy metals, which we mine as a country. So our mining sector is very much exposed to this particular policy shift because it reduces the demand for minerals internationally, which has a pricing effect on reducing the price of commodities internationally. So this policy shift is probably meant to circumvent such kind of actions, orchestrating as well as signaling the intent to douse any trade wars and improve relations that are of economic nature between the two countries.
You talked about improving the cake. How best can that be achieved?
Well, in the medium to long term, there are obviously a cocktail of measures beyond this particular policy shift, where there's need for there to be improved political climate between the two countries to capacitate bilateral relations and also look at multilateral organizations such as the AU, the SADC, in a way bid to indirectly be able to trade with them.
Some economists have argued that this will reduce the competitiveness of locally produced goods as compared to those being imported into the country, as they will appear cheaper. What's your take on that?
Well, holding other aspects that may probably make an economy more competitive, yes, it could be true. But there are other aspects also that contribute to overall competitiveness of any country beyond tariffs. Obviously, tariffs.
So, notwithstanding this, we can still ensure that there is competitiveness.
There is competitiveness, yes, absolutely. You can look at other aspects. There is a bit of a distance between the American market and ourselves, and this is also a price that the traders need to pay
Right.
for them to be able to trade. But also, in this particular scenario, we are more concerned of the signaling effect which it has, which is where you've alluded to earlier around the price, the mineral commodity prices, and the quantity of heavy metals that will be consumed by the Americans.
All right. What steps should African, governments in that case then take to mitigate the negative effects of this U.S. these U.S. trade measures?
Well, it's been a long time since we've had such kind of trade wars orchestrating internationally. Right. So reaction in the short term may not be much, except for maybe, internal realignment of their policies in a way that shields themselves against the impact of such, policy measures. We may look at diversifying their markets away from the American market to other like noted economies like the European Union, as well as the Eastern market, to the Eastern giant, as some people may put it. It's a heavily consuming economy, which African markets and African governments can look at, probably aligning and directing their producers towards
that. We were there's an issue of the standoff between the United States and China. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting situation where you've got big, economies pulling their weights and pulling their muscle at the global stage. But at the end of the day, there's no winner whenever there's an economic war of such nature. There's need for diplomacy, but also it also shows that there's need for well-thought policies before implementing. But
will that this decision, will that not also create problems for us in terms of other countries, perhaps within the region and within the continent, then saying, but why, if you have this policy where you are saying American goods are going to come in your country for close to nothing or nothing at all, would they also not want that for themselves?
Well, for African markets, as I mentioned earlier, we are primary or extractive providers for big economies. So whenever there's a trade war, there's reduced consumption, there's shocks of trade between the two. So it's got a trickle-down effect of reducing the quantity of produce that may be demanded for us. For example, lithium, chrome, gold, and all those things.
And obviously, that in turn affects our economies.
Our economies, and the pricing as well. Our foreign currency generating capabilities also curtailed to some extent.
All right. Lastly, Zimbabwe marked 45 years of independence recently, and President Mnangagwa reiterated the resilience of Zimbabwe's economy in the face of enduring Western sanctions, climate-induced shocks, and global market disruptions. Can you comment on the progression to economic recovery for the past 45 years in Zimbabwe?
Well, it's been a roller coaster for the economy, largely due to various phases of growth, development, as well as retardation. But I would submit that as a country we remain resilient, and our growth prospects remain bright. If you look at sector-based statistics, where the mining sector is inching towards $12 billion mark, the currency at the moment, with the introduction of the ZIG and the policies there too.
The agricultural sector has also been quite well this year, considering that we had quite some decent rains.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also inching towards wheat sufficient as a country. And also the grain and the mills and all those things, they are poised to have serious output and downstream effect on our industries and overall.
Because if we have sufficient sufficient food for ourselves, then we can also then get to also export the excess.
Export and also save on our imports, because foreign currency is then required to import food, as was the case in the previous agricultural
season. Mr. Gwadu, thank you very much for taking time out to come and have these conversations with us. We greatly appreciate that. That's it for this segment of World of Business. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. To the final segment of World of Business, where we get to cast a spotlight on our entrepreneur of the week. This week, our field correspondent, Sela Marere, had a sit down with a Chihota-based farmer, focusing on rural industrialization and modernized farming methods. Let's get more from that interview.
Talking about bringing productivity back to the village and in support of the rural industrialization agenda, today we visited a Chiota-based communal farmer majoring in poultry production and horticulture. He recently won the Communal Farmer of the Year award for Mashonaland East. Mr. Tendai Mapisa will walk us through his journey as an entrepreneur and a farmer in Chiota and how he has managed to turn the hot soils of Chiota into very arable land that can be used for agriculture. Stay tuned. Mapisa, maybe tichitanga chirongwa mungade utudza kuti ndiani anonzi Councillor Tendai Mapisa for the benefit of vanhu vari kukuonai kekutanga pachifitifiti.
Maita zvenyu. Zita rangu ndinoitwa Tendai Mapisa. Ndiri chizvarwa chemuno Machimwenye village under Chief Chiota. Tiri muno Machimwenye ndiri kuitawo mabasa ekurima. Pari kurimwa madomasi, pari kurimwa huku. Ise zvamuri kungoona panapa. Ndini zvakare ndava councillor weward 18 Marondera Rural District Council kubva 2023 kusvika 2028.
Kurima ndiko kwamakagara muchingoda kuita here muupenyu hwenyu, makazopinda mukurima zvaita sei?
Ndinotenda zvikuru. Kurima chinhu chakagara chiri mandiri. Of course pakutanga semunhu anenge abva kuchikoro unombotanga kuita mabasa akasiyana-siyanei, but nekuzokura tuzoona kuti chinhu chega chingatoita demand pamunhu kudya. Saka nemhaka yekuti kudya market yacho haiperi, zvakandiita kuti zvindisunde ndipinde mukurima. Ndosaka mukuna pane variety, pane madomasi acho, pane nyama yacho, pane mabatanata acho, mbambaira dziripo, pane maveji. Zvese izvozvo takazviona kuti aiwa nyange kukanzi kwaita nzara, kwaita drought, kwaita hondo, vanhu vanoda kudya chete.
Muri kuchengeta huku on a large scale, mabroilers enyu, muri kuchengeta, muri kurima zvakare madomasi, mabatanat neizvo zvatinodeedza izvo kuti horticulture. Kosei makasarudza kupinda into horticulture? Hamuna kuda kusarudza kurima zvimwe zvirimwa zvese zvatinoona zvinorimwa nemamwe mafamasi, makachuza horticulture and also even livestock production. Hamuna kufarira kuda kuita zvemombe, zvembudzi? Pangava paine chinangwa here kana kuti mune zvamakaona mumarket zvakakuitai kuti mude kurima zvinhu izvi?
Ndakatanga ndiri kutaundi, munoziva kuti kutaundi kune fast life inonzi nevakomana vechimanje manje madhiri, but ndakaona kuti madhiri ekuharira anodhirikira. Ndobva ndauya kuno kumusha, ndobva ndaona kuti ndechipi chinhu chingandipe mari very fast. Ndosaka makwana ndakapinda mumabroiler. Mumabroilers within 6 weeks unenge wabata mari. Mbandaona kuti aiwa within 6 weeks ndabata mari, zvandiri kuwana mumanyowa umu chireka ndichiita sei nemvura yandakanga ndaona pasi yakawanda, ndo pandikada chireka ndichibatanidza huku nemadomasi. Ese aya macrops andiri kuti ane zvawaya ndo andinoti nini macash cows, macash crops kwandiri. Zvakati siyanei nekurima mombe nefodya, nekuti zvirimwa zvangu izvi ine nguva yakareba atori madomasi ekuti 3 months ndakutodya mari. Ndosaka ndakada macrops iwayo.
Asi susu mukukura kwedu takanzwa kuti kwaChiota kune ivhu rakaomarara, ivhu risiri nyore kurima. They refer to your lands as having very dry soils. How have you managed kukwanisa kurima kuita yatinoti horticulture imo muine ivhu rinodai kupisa kudai?
Vanhu vangade kuita farming kunzvimbo ineyi, chandingatoda kukurudzira kunyanya kusvika paground, vakaya paground voona matechniques atiri kushandisa panapa. Ivhu irori ramukuti ane zvaro tinogona kuti riri dry but tinotoriti sand soil, ivhu rinovava risina munyepfu wakakwana. But isusu panapa because zvanambotaura paya kuti tiri kuzvibatanidza nehorticulture, horticulture inotipa manyowa. Saka ivhu redu tinogara takarisa manyowa nguva nenguva, takarisa lime nguva nenguva kuti rivandudzike. Ndosaka muri kuona madomasi edu atinotorima panapa, one plant inotipawo zvekuma 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kgs per plant. Saka ndo zvinhu zvikuita kuti tinge tichitapirwa nekurima kwatiri kuita.
Right. Mataura imi mukati makasarudza kurima kwamakaona kuti this would be fast, this would be a fast cash cow. Mukataura imi kuti kuchengeta huku ma 6 weeks zvakakubatsirai kuti munge muchikwanisa kuwana ma fast returns. Are you saying this is always a smooth flow yekuti hapana mamwe ma-challenges anogona kusanganikwa nawo chore nevamwe varimi vangade kuita the same thing?
Ma-challenges andakambosangana nawo kumashure uku akanga ari emarket. Of course kumashure uku takambenge tichisupply mamarkets akafanana nasari. But takazoona kuti aiwa beta kuti kana tichinge tarima huku dzedu tidziendese kune vaya vanotenga ari malive beds vonotengesawo. Zvazvakureva ndezvekuti tinenge takudzitengesa neprice yakati dzikei, asi price yati dzikei kudaro chinozoita tizomaximize kuwedzera mavolumes. ndofunga mukatarisa panapa tiri kutovaka matanga kuti matanga edu aramba achiwanda. Ndofunga target iri panapa tiri kufunga kuti kanga takuchengeta huku zvekuma 50,000.
Tarisa dingindira riri kumhanya nehurumende yedu yeSecond Republic vari kutaura nezvekuvandudza nzvimbo dzekumaruwa kuti dzifanane nedzemumatauni yatinotiyo pachirungu rural industrialization or rural development. Imimi senzvimbo sepano panzvimbo yenyu yamuri kurima muchiita maprojects enyu ndezvipi zvamaita zviri kusapota dingindira rehurumende?
Patinotaura nyaya dzerural industrialization tinofanira kunge tine magetsi, tinofanira kunge tine mvura yakachena. Ndofunga mukatarisa panapa tine bhoho redu, tine matengi edu emvura, vanhu vepanapa vanochera mvura patepi. Izvo tiri kuzviita kuvandudza utano hwavo, kuvandudza magariro avo kuitira kuti vangozoita feeling yekufunga kuti handisi mutaundi nekuti kuno kuruzevha hakuna marobots ende hakuna matower lights, but zvimwe zvese tine solar system, malights kune pakati ngwengwe kana uri usiku. Saka tavandudza zvakanyanya zvekuti potse vari kumatowns vakatouya kuno vanofunga pamwe vatove kumatowns.
Definitely. Kansela, takatarisa zvirongwa zvamuri kuita pano pamusha, ndezvipi zvamungati zviri kubenefita, zviri kubatsira vanhu vemunharaunda ino kuburikidza nekuva kansela kwenyu nemaprojects amuri kuita, ndezvipi zvavari kubenefita?
Okay, fine. Maita zvenyu. Chekutanga vanhu vemunharaunda vari kubenefita nyaya yemabasa, employment creation. Chechipiri vanhu vemunharaunda vari kubenefita ruzivo rwuri panapa rwatiri kushandisa tichirutorawo samwe, ivo vari kubenefitawo. Vanhu vepanapa vari kubenefita kuwana even manyowa chaivo kuti vanovandudzawo ivhu ravo kuti vagona gohwo rakanaka. Vanhu vemunharaunda vari kubenefita modern technology vari kuona pano yekudiridzisa like madrip irrigation. Zvino huku dzedu tiri kudziburitsa ari malive beds, but ramangwana redu ndozvakamaonapo magetsi taisa pano. Tine urongwa hwekuti tinge tichiita abattoir panapa. Taita abattoir yedu to blast freezer huku, tadze blast freezer tochidzipakeja, tadzipakeja taakutsvaga kune vanoda kutenga huku vachiita sei vachidzitengesawo dzaaddressed. For the meantime aiwa nguva yekuti tiite bhucha hatina, bozvitsawo tifokase nguva yedu zhinji tiri pano paproduction, tiri muno muruzevha tichisimbisa nyaya yerural industrialization.
Saka ndezvipi zvirongwa zviri kuitwa nehurumende zviri kubatsira macommunal farmers edu emuno muZimbabwe? Ndezvipi? What recommendations can you pass to our government with regards to support yamungade semacommunal farmers, and also kuti mugokwanisa kuempower nekuexpanda knowledge kuvagari vamunenge muinavo munzvimbo yenyu?
Hurumende yedu yavaMnangagwa tinoitenda zvakanyanya, ine zvirongwa zvakawanda. To start with, tine ma-agricultural extension officers anogara ari muno achitipa ruzivo pachena. Tine zvirongwa zvepfumvudza, mukatarisa nezvinenyaya yeclimate change. Pfumvudza yakaunzwa nehurumende kuitira kuti tifaite nyaya yenzara, tigare isusu dumbu redu rakaguta, tiri kupiwa mainputs mahara, tiri kupiwa mbeu mahara. Saka zvese izvozvo tiri kuzvitenda ende tiri kuzvifarira. Also tine nyaya yemabhoho ari kucherwa nehurumende nechirongwa chapresident. Saka zvese izvo zvinhu zvakawanda zviri kuita kuti hurumende yedu inge ichitisimudzira.
Tinopendera program yedu takatasana nemayouth senyika tasangana nedambudziko revanhu vari kuabhisa madrugs especially vechidiki, and yet mukuru wedu wenyika anogara achitaura kuti the youths are the future of Zimbabwe. Ndezvipi zvamungade kutiudza mashoko ekurudziro kune vechidiki, kunyanya vechidiki, maererano nezvavangaite mukushandisa agriculture as a means of supporting and growing the economy of Zimbabwe?
Ndofunga pane mashoko aya anonzi catch them young. Vechidiki ivavo ndo vandambotaura paya ndichiti isu taakutopota tichiti muzvikoro imomo vapote vachiuya pano vachiva neyemuro, vachiva nekuda kuzo nechidokwa-dokwa. Sezvo ini ndiri mutungamiri wenzvimbo ineyi sakansela, vechidiki vanenge vachiona ndiri kansela vaona production. Saka ini ndiri kuona sekuti ramangwana iro vemadrugs vachange vakuita vachiderera, because vanenge vaona kuti tiri muno muruzevha mumwe chete, asi muruzevha imomo mune production yatakakura tichiona. Pavanezenge vasvikawo palevel yekuti vanenge vasange vakuwanawo cheuwiri in terms of capital, hazvivanetse kuti vange vachiuya vachikopa panapa.
It's the conversation we're having today with Mr. Tendai Mapisa, who is also a councillor for Marondera Rural District Council, and he has emphasized on the need for the youths to shun drug and substance abuse and learn from those that have come before them, that agriculture is indeed the backbone of the economy of Zimbabwe. And that brings an end to this week's segment of our Entrepreneur of the Week. Be sure to join us again next time. It's back to the studio.
That's it from this week's edition of World of Business, as we continue to give you more business news. Until next time, have a pleasant viewing.